Welcome to the Standard Signal. I'm your host, Zadal Lama. Today I brought my guest, Jawar Mohammed, again. I think, Jawar, this is for the third time that we are meeting in my podcast. But we will be discussing today about the election. We are going to have an election next Monday. Something somehow doesn't feel like there is going to be an election. But that's what we are going to discuss, because there are, unlike previous elections that Ethiopians are used to, there are so many anomalies in this election, Jawar, and we will be going through a couple of them. But my first question, Jawar, to you is, what would be your first response if I say, what stood out for you in terms of the anomalies, the unusualities of this election? Jawar, just to start with my first question.
What surprised me is how concerned they appear to be. They act as if there is actually a real competition, as if there is such strong opposition and conducive political environment that they could lose some seats. I mean, the amount of manipulation, the amount of intimidation they are carrying out in areas where there is no, even those nominal oppositions are not registered. In several districts where the ruling party is running by itself, they are going house to house and intimidating people to vote for the ruling party. Who else are they going to vote for? And the amount of resources they are putting into the campaign, and they are in some areas they are giving multiple cards to the same people to vote for them, even when there is no competition. That's really what surprised me. They actually at this stage they could make it free and fair and still win because there's no opposition participating. There are almost all of the opposition who are participating in this election are there. They have made prior agreement with the ruling party. They have already been assigned certain seats. And the outcome of the election was decided way before even the registration of voters started. But still, the ruling party want to display this sense of seriousness and communicate as if they are fighting very, very hard electoral battle.
That's a very interesting observation, because I have also seen it. I'm most intrigued by the number of mobilization that's taking place or has been taking place. I think now this is a reflection time, a quiet moment, the next 3-4 days. But before that, particularly in the Amhara region, where there is really no formidable opposition and the public was mobilized and there's a lot of resources spent in. They even had a campaign rally by cars only. I've seen that once, like hundreds of cars lined up campaigning for the ruling Prosperity Party. So that's one anomaly. But I want you to expand on this. Can I call it a consensus, an agreement with some opposition parties, for example, the Izema and the Nama, whereby the ruling party deliberately left out from fielding candidates. I've seen some reports that say up to 14% of parliamentary seat. I have seen you report once that the Oromo Federalist Congress was also offered up to, 30 seats in the parliament, and that they declined. I asked Professor Marera I think 2 weeks ago, whether this is true or not. He did not deny, he did not confirm either. I want you to expand on this kind of arrangement. How do we interpret this? This sort of, it's very unique arrangement, isn't it? I mean, I'm not a political scientist, Jawar, but comment on that one, please.
Look, most of the parties and the leaders have been compromised for various reasons, not just for material reasons, but many of them have given up on the struggle for democracy. They realize that even if the ruling party want to make the election conducive, it's impossible to do it because it doesn't control the large part of the country. in my estimate, it will be physically possible to conduct election in less than 30% of the country. And this is what I said a few months ago. And I followed the registration of voters and the campaigns over the last 2-3 months, and I think I'm probably right. They were able to do it only on main highways, zonal capitals, and some more other capitals. Outside that, they have not been able to register, let alone distribute ballot and carry out the voting. They were not able to register voters. Either voters in the countryside is controlled by rebels in Amara and Oromia region. The rebels are preventing people from going to town. You have to go to town to register because the electoral people cannot go to the rural areas, the rural polling station to register you. So you have to come to the towns. And people are not willing to come to the town because they fear either they're not interested in the election or they fear the rebels. And the electoral people are not willing to go because they're scared of the rebels. So they were not able to register people. The political parties, many of them realized that this is just a symbolic election. They wanted, for example, OFC, the Oromo Federalist Party, fielded about 10 candidates just to stay within the legal requirement. Some other parties were they wanted some of their people to be in the parliament, so they made a deal with the ruling party. From what I have is about, if they keep their word, they will give about 45 seats for the opposition in the federal parliament. Similar arrangement on for regional parliament as well. It's a difficult situation, so I don't want to name names. I don't want to call out the parties, but almost all of the parties were offered in advance. Some accepted it, some rejected it. Those who accepted it are participating. We know for sure, for example, from among the candidates who will be there, some of them are, the individuals, for example, individual candidates, independent candidates.
Independent.
The ruling party is not fielding candidates there for them. In where the oppositions are running, either they are not fielding candidate or they have already told their cadres to not vote for the ruling party, but to make arrangement for the opposition to come in. This is tricky because the National Party could decide, the PP at the center could decide to give a seat in Gololcha for Jawar, for example, where I would have been running. But the guy who would be running against me in Gololcha, who controls the local apparatus, could do it otherwise. If you remember what happened to Brahanu Nagga in the last election, he was assured, Abiy did give an order for people, for his local machine to ensure Brahanu gets elected against PP's official candidate. They didn't want Brahanu to run by himself. They didn't want to, they wanted to look like it was competitive. But the local machine had another idea. So on the voting day, a guy who was not known at all ended up winning that seat. So Brahanu had to be compensated by becoming a minister. So there are 45 seats that are on the table already allocated for the opposition. For the opposition and for the independent combined. Will it materialize? It's to be seen. So it's not a consensus. It's really a co-optation. It's not a consensus. It's a co-optation. Many of the. By the way, there are a number of political parties that are actually a branch of PP. For example, Izema is really a branch of PP. So is Aben. It's a branch of PP. And a number of, there is like New Generation Party that was actually created. And I remember when Abiy was talking about creating a party with that name. That was the name of Prosperity he was thinking before he fixated on Prosperity. So he gave it to another party.
This is really an optics management rather than a competitive election, given by what has taken place so far. But what defies logic here is, Jawar, the involvement of the National Electoral Board. This is an institution, one of the, I think, 3 or 4 institutions that were thought to have been gone through a reform, right? When we talk about the electoral reform, the judiciary reform, reform in the security sector, and all this. So the election board was taught to be somehow independent. Even in the last election under Lady Burtukan Midagsa, it somehow tried to show a semblance of independence in its rulings, in its administration of the electoral affairs. It showed. I'm not saying it was independent. But even as compared to how it was in 2021 election, Jawar, you can prove me wrong or right here. The electoral board has been reduced to not to function as an independent institution, but to manage these optics, right? To churn out numbers, to give that semblance of normalcy, while at the same time it is really constraining parties from participating through technicalities, administrative attrition. There's so many complaints from opposition parties of having their members deregistered because of some unfulfilled requirements of rules and regulations. So the electoral board is reduced into becoming the manager of these optics, this performance, whether in its debates that it says happened under the auspices of the electoral board or whatnot. What did you think of this change, this kind of morphology of the electoral board from an institution to something that is just there to manage the optics of the ruling party?
It's not only the election board, those reforms, those pretensions, an electoral board, human rights commission, a number of the judiciary, people like Burtukan, Maaza, Daniel, who believed in two things. One, they genuinely believed we are embarking on democratization. Second, they believed that now the ideology they believed in is winning. That is a centrist or Ethiopianist camp is now in grip. While under Burtukan, the electoral board was doing okay, but it would not be fair for me not to point one thing. While they did a lot of technical works to improve the board's performance, they were working hand in glove with Abiy because they believed Abiy was there to crack down and destroy ethno-nationalist parties, TPLF, OLF, OFC, and others. So the reform and the work they were doing run up to the 2020 election, 2021 election was really about putting conditions in place so that ethno-nationalist parties will disappear for good. They really believed in that. They were fooled. That was a tactic for consolidation of power. Because at that point, the most significant electoral and political threat to Abiy was coming from this better organized, more popular entities. Do you remember how big fuss you made about my citizenship? I mean, she went way out of her line to, even after I renounced my citizenship, she dwelled on it. I mean, there is a little bit of gratification to what happened to her. They used her. You remember Maaza, how all that legal reform and stuff. A lot of our friends, Badir and others from abroad, went back and helped. Actually, they did so much work because I was there. They did so much work for legal reform. They did so much work for reforming Daniel did so much work to really improve the Human Rights Commission. Burtukan also, although she was doing that political project, in terms of actually institutionalizing, improving the institutional performance of the electoral board, she did a lot of work. So much resource was put into it from the international community as well. But that was a tactical play. The minute the war in the north ended and power consolidation moved south, when the minute he needed more on our side of the constituency, in the Oromo side of the constituency, in the southern side of the constituency, boom, the Ethiopianist agenda was discarded, the reformist agenda was discarded. Remember the work that went into the kind of the technical, the material that was put into the media laws, the civic societies. So many people actually worked very, very hard, but there was never a plan to implement that reform. So starting 3 years ago, basically all those individuals were taken out of the system one by one. Burtukan is gone, Maza is gone, Daniel is gone, people at civic society are gone. Who are in their place? The old EPRDFites, the old cadres. Berhanu at the Human Rights Commission. The lady at, he brought her from the church, basically. She's his church peers. He just brought her to the Electoral Commission. Almost all of these institutions that were lauded for being reformed and seen as a pillar of future of democracy have been, one, the personnel were chased out, removed, replaced. Second, the laws that were, remember all those conferences where international experts came, so much money came in, all those laws have been scrapped. The media law has been, I don't know if it's already implemented, but they're changing the media law. The electoral law is so and so. Let me just say, for example, in the country, for example, in the proclamation on the intelligence organization, on federal police, on military, on so others, they're supposed to be independent. Now, people who are leading the intelligence apparatus, they are central committee members. But at that point, they wrote a law that says chief of intelligence deputy cannot be a party. Chief of police, but now they are in the central committee. So they have done away with the pretense of democratization. Democratization is no longer, they don't even want to pretend about it. They are now purely towards, if they succeed, towards authoritarian consolidation, and they believe they are consolidating.
It was interesting. Yesterday, I was looking at this speech or some kind of presentation done by Sisai Tola, the deputy of the National Intelligence, talking about the election, and I found it a bit triggering. Honestly, he was sort of like giving a lecture to members of his organization, or I'm not quite sure about the scene, but he was talking about the four purposes of why this election is important. So this is the first time, I think, even by our own experience, that we have seen such a higher level intelligence officer weighing in on an election. So I'm just saying this to reinforce your argument about.
Remember his boss, Redwan Hussein, is chairing the media board or something.
Yeah, he's the board of directors of the media, the Ethiopian Media Authority. Yeah.
Have you ever heard in any world where the head of the chief spy oversees the media? I mean, we cried about the EPRD people, but let alone Getachew Assefa lead a media entity. We will never saw him his face. We know he was manipulating the media from behind.
He was a ghost. I remember when I think soon after I became to power, where there were these very prominent memes that the memes of ghosts were named after Getachew Assefa, because nobody knew his face. We only knew his reputation. And so these ghost memes were so funny. Anyhow, I don't want to derail off the topic. I want us to stay with the election before I let you go. The other anomaly I have seen, Jawar, is the number of registered voters. We are now north of 50 million, right? And this has seen an increase by more than 30%, I think, even as opposed to the election. I was looking at a graph that was developed by one friend of mine, and just as a comparison, that's an increase by 30%. But here is the catch here, Jawar. I want you to reflect on that one. We have not done a census. The election board, actually, by constitution, I don't know much about the constitution itself. I think the electoral board needs to insist on census outcomes before organizing communities for election. We don't have that. We had our last census in 2007. That is 20 years ago. And yet we have now these figures of registered voters, 50 million or 50 plus. How did you read that? What sense are we supposed to make out of that? Where is this optics coming from? And for what?
Remember, the reason there is no census, the reason given for not doing the census is because the security situation does not permit it. So they are not able to count people in the Kabbalists, but they are able to register them for the election. Look, because parties and medias made the issue of, made an argument that the security situation in the three regions, Tigray, Amhara, Oromia, makes conducting election, not conducive, right? So they wanted to show that, it was conducive. We did not only able to, I think, didn't she say like only 8 constituencies in Amhara they were not able to register?
Unnamed constituencies. The constituencies are not named. This is an interesting aspect.
Unnamed, right? Let me just give you an anecdote how they register people. Basically, I say this because I spent so much time talking to the election board's people who are leading the zones, people who are registering people, supposed to register people at police station level, right? So from the get-go, they realized, the government and also election people realized that they are not able to register people. Remember, they extended twice or something. The reason they did it, actually, the first round, they tried to register people. They couldn't register. So they gave instruction to find names and register them regardless of what. So they would sit around. They take, I don't know what idder is in English. I don't think it exists. They idder, where the system our people use for fosha. They use it for wedding and mourning to help each other. There are membership list. You get that list, and they will just write it, the names, because the names are there, ages are there. They will register it. The other thing they did is in elementary school, kids as in 5th grade, 4th grade were registered. Even in towns where, if you go, for example, Sadala goes to register, and they tell you how many family members you have, 5, and maybe your husband is of age, but your kids could be younger. No, don't worry. Here is 5 cards for you. You register all of them. So they made up the numbers by registering. In some areas, for example, I'll write this report in one district. I think it's in West Shawa. Because of the conflict with OLA, people have left the Kabale, the polling station area. There is just no people living there anymore. There are, they made it mandatory that every poll station has to register 1,500 people in Oromia, 1,500 people. So 1,500 people have to be registered. And the guy was telling me, adding police, militia, and everything, they were able to register less than 300 people because the residents they have become IDPs. They have been displaced. So they just went back to, they just made up, for example, names from hospitals, names from any names they can find from any government file was used. Therefore, they end up registering people who already died, people who are already migrated to Arab countries. They even registered OLA soldiers, forgetting that the guys are already in the bushes, right? So there was a joke actually. The guy was asking me, check with with the election people in Dumuga, they might have registered your name. So they were registering people everywhere because they really, the objective is, they want the optics. They beat the record from last year by last cycle by 30% because people are so excited about it, and also because contrary to what the opposition and other people are saying, 99% of the country is peaceful and they were able to register. That's what they wanted to communicate, and they really made it so difficult for people. In area where they're able to, an area where the security allowed them to register, they forced people. I think we discussed this before. They forced people to register. If you don't have the election card, you cannot travel, you cannot get banking service, you cannot get any government service. So they forced people to register in towns. Even that was not enough to make up. So they are announcing 50 million plus. In my estimate, they were not able to register even half of that. Even half of that is not an actual living person, willing person who registered for election. And I'll send you how these young guys who doing it for their job, they're paid, and they get these rosters from Iddir, from health clinic, from others, and they sit at nights and register them. They have this pile of election cards on their table. They are taking picture and sending to me. So I was hiding some of it for their identity, but I think we can share some.
Yeah, I've seen some posters about registration cards in some polling stations or in some constituencies in Amhara region. Some of the registration cards were being safeguarded by local militia just to protect them. So that the people can use them on the election date. So that's what I'm saying. When I started this podcast, there's so many anomalies on that. But part of me still would like to believe that the election board, or is there something to salvage from the election board or the institution? There are employees that are genuinely committed to the principles, the founding principles of the electoral board. Part of me would like to believe that there is something to be salvaged. And I wanted to ask you, Jawar, to what extent do you think is the election board aware of these anomalies in the registration processes? I know that they have once issued a statement warning coercive registration will be penalized or something to that effect. To what extent are they aware of this cadre level or street level thuggery by the cadres that are doing the registration, forcing people, coercing people, knocking on the doors? Is the board a part of this?
They are 100% aware of it, and they're 100% part of it. Even some of these people, the idealist people who are committed to it, who competed, got hired. Initially, they thought, at least technically, they can do some independent work. They were intimidated by local militia, by police, by cadres, and when they appealed to the board leadership, they were told to shut up if they want to be safe. The board people are either they're fully part of it, some of them are themselves are scared. Just like the National Dialogue people, they know what's happening. Either they don't care about it, or they are part of it, or they are scared. So, is there something to be salvaged? No. I think this would be technically. I'm not talking about free and fair competitive election. Election as a technical exercise, this has been probably the worst compared to even since we started. By the way, they call it the seventh election. This is not the seventh election. There was election during Haile Selassie. While there was manipulation, there was actually technical capabilities. There was some level of competition as well during the emperor time. And in the Dark, I don't think we had much of an election. During the APRDF, there's a lot of manipulation. There's no question about it. But there was some level of technical, the machinery of the election board worked. But the machinery is not really working. And people at the lower level, at the zonal level, there are some okay people. But at the polling station level, at constituency level, they are all people who were, for example, in Romania, they call them Gacana Sirna. These are, you remember the people with the weird clothing who do stuff? They just took off that uniform and became election board officials at the local level, and some of them became observers. Sometimes they confuse, actually. They confuse, and one of the election people was telling me they confuse their job, and they don't even pretend that, and they campaign. They register people, and when there was campaigning, there was campaign last couple of weeks, they forget they are elected, they are officials, so they go to these rallies advocating for the ruling party.
I looked at the video you posted yesterday, Jawar, of I don't know if they are the members of Gacha Nasirna or one of those security outfits endlessly being financed by the regional, the Oromia regional government. Where Tokulama, what was that, Sunday or so? I don't know whether to cry or laugh at that video, but it's such a tragic picture, maybe it's easier to make fun of it and to, let it pass. But ultimately, this is not something to laugh about, at in the interest of self-preservation, you can smile and make jokes about it, but it really is not, Jawar. It's particularly, and I want us to come back to that. You mentioned the national dialogue, and I want us to make a connection here, Jawar, between the election and the national dialogue. A few weeks ago, the Prime Minister was on public saying that more than 90% of the works the national dialogue did qualifies to be, to be accepted or something like this. You can correct me. So essentially what he's saying is the works of the national dialogue is a done deal. It's a fait accompli. They have reached out the people, never mind that Tigray has been completely left out, both from the election and the national dialogue. So I think what we're looking for is that there is this election in which the ruling party is going to win by landslide and then give some seats to friendly opposition parties. And then there is the national dialogue. So when you put these two together, what picture does it give you, Jawar? This optics management, the performance, what is the end result of that? And how can that be consequential going forward for Ethiopia?
Look, as I said about the election, about the national dialogue, my worry about this symbolic performances, they are closing opportunities for using these mechanisms to move Ethiopia forward. The way they run the national dialogue, it's such a joke that if you mention the idea of national dialogue in the future, nobody's going to take it serious.
Yeah.
They damage the idea of reconciling a country through a national dialogue. The same thing they did with, remember those commission, the border commission, we have a number of identity and border disputes, not only in between Tigray and Amhara, but also elsewhere. There was so much hope. Those disputes can be resolved through negotiations, through engaging the communities. Those commissions expired without doing anything. If you mention that kind of commission today, people will laugh at you. Nobody will take you serious. Also, the Peace and Reconciliation Commission, it disappeared. The national dialogue, if you mention it in the future, even under future circumstances, it would be very difficult. Same with transitional justice. Now, under EPRDF, or even before that, while people know the election is not going to be free and fair, people thought they can struggle. There is a room for struggling to make it freer in the future. Now that hope is died, has died, at least under current regime. If you look at the conversations, these videos I'm posting, the ruling party's people are actually joking. They know this is just a pretension. They know this is not an election. They know who will be in parliament. They know who will be prime minister. They know who is where. And there is so much cynicism about election has, have taken space that people have lost any respect for idea of election. Election has become so devalued that not only among the ruling party, also among the population. It is going to take a lot of effort to bring the citizens to believe, elections matter. If you saw, so many citizens have been recording themselves saying, please don't waste public resources. Okay, You are elected. Just continue. Don't wake me up. For example, one of the campaign in Mefinde in Shaggar was they were going around door to door at 4 a.m. waking people for this forced support rallies. People are saying, "Please, I will vote for you. Just don't wake me up at 4 a.m." There's nobody competing against you. So the election becomes just a joke, and the consequence of that is the aspiration for democracy, the aspiration for policies and politics through competitive electoral system has died, and this will have, I think, a lasting ramification. That's what concerns me. And for example, not only on the election though, you mentioned earlier how the guy in the video I posted, it was a police officer who was trained in militia. Okay, that's a local police officer. One of the most senior generals, General Mohammed, was sitting at election rally next to the Amara PP leadership at a rally with his full uniform.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't even pretend. We know the army is under the Abiy and the ruling party. We know, but there is that in other countries. In this what do we call it? Electoral authoritarian systems. There is a bit of pretension about separation of power, about distinguishing the judiciary and the military and others from the executive. In Oromia, by Oromia law and also Ethiopian law, the judiciary is separate. For example, the Attorney General and the judges and others are not supposed to be political, right? The Attorney General of Oromia actually appeared on TV to debate on behalf of the ruling party. Even that symbolic pretension has disappeared, and election as a system, as a system, has died in Ethiopia now.
And yet, I think the combined outcomes, quote unquote, of both the national dialogue and this election is going to provide the ruling party with the legitimacy to amend, among others, the constitution. I think they have expressed a keen interest in changing the government, the system from the parliamentary to presidential. I think the preparation, the road was being paved for that to happen. Now, I have no interest in whether they do that or this or that, as long as it could stabilize Ethiopia. I think ultimately everybody's interest is going to be to see a stable Ethiopia where you could be able to go out and come back and win your daily bread. I think that's what Ethiopians by and large want at the moment. Do you think that would be the case once we got into that trajectory, once we got into that path, that it would provide a lasting stability, peace? Forget the prosperity, just these two aspects of an Ethiopian state.
The initial plan was, when they launched the national dialogue, they thought it would produce the intended result before the election, so that the necessary change can happen before the election. This election will be a presidential election instead of parliamentarian. But things didn't go as planned. Now the next plan B is to use the national dialogue's recommendations to change the constitutions and do away with parliamentarian, do away with a number of the proclamations in all the articles in the constitution. Will it stabilize? It will make things worse. Look, even the current constitution is contested because a large segment of the political constituency in the country felt unrepresented when this election was, when this constitution was developed. Today, even more so. So, can make an amendment to the constitution. They don't need a national dialogue. They could have run it through the parliament, and others they can make fake referendum, just like they're doing fake election. They can change it. It will make things worse. It will That will tell even the remaining, it will shut down the remaining political space, even this little thing that was there, and it will embolden armed groups. It will increase our fragmentation across the political spectrum. The idea is they change the constitution, then make it presidential. And I think Abiy was talking how they're going to put term limit into it. So the last 12 years, including this one, will be not presidential. Then it will have another 10 years, 20 something. That's the calculation. Will that happen? There are going to be a lot of things happening in the next 5 years, let alone next 10 years. It will only complicate matters. It will not resolve the situation in Tigray. We have been pleading for the Tigray issue to be resolved. Tigray is now quasi-independent state. Amhara now is where Tigray was in 2019, 2020. Amhara is now on the path, holding the path to Tigray. The ruling party has little to no control in Amhara region. The only difference is the Fano groups have not formed a government. And they are very close to doing that because they have wrestled much of the region from the hand of the government. In Oromia, despite all the claims they make, the ruling party has abandoned the rural areas. So on top of that, when you're supposed to create the political space conducive enough so that you can force an alternative reality, that you can have an argument against the rebels that says, hey, you have a difference, you have an issue with how the country is run, come to the political table. That table is no longer there. And if you continue to change laws, to amend constitutions, to make policies, regardless of what's happening in the country, you just make things worse. So what they're following is just a path to further trouble. But we're talking about the election day after that. But the day after the election, remember, 70 to 80% of Ethiopian army is dug in trenches in the northern front. War could start any minute. That's what people forget. People forget because PP and Abiy stopped talking about Red Sea and about Assab. But the army that was sent north is still there and ready to fire at any minute. From on the western front, Army Saba of the TPLF and the SAF of the Sudan and other forces are almost inside Benishangul right now. On air, they have been bombarding the Benishangul region. Now, today they are fighting on the border, and some of the elements are actually inside Ethiopia border right now. There is actually forces from Sudan that have already crossed into Ethiopian border and they are fighting. So, yeah, go figure.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Western Front is something that I'm really following with trepidation, I must say. Not because the Sudan conflict could spill over Ethiopia's border, but because the guard is in Benishangul Gumuz regional state. And that, if you ask me, is what keeps me awake at night. But we will discuss that one on a different podcast, Jawar. I'm also interested in this aspect of the election. The European Union is not coming to observe, and this would be for the second time. I want you to briefly reflect on that one, because in one way or another, these partners, development partners, are financing the election board. The European Union itself recently lifted the sanction for direct budget support. I'm not saying that's going to go straight to the election board, but in one way or another, some financing is coming to the election board from the development partners for an election they're not willing to observe or unable to observe. How are we ordinary citizens going, supposed to interpret that contradiction, Jawar?
Since my prison time, I spent much of my time engaging diplomats. For first time in my political career, I actually spent time talking to statesmen, diplomats, spies and spokes, and I kind of understood how this thing works. I didn't know much because I was so focused on the activism part of it, on mobilizing people. The diplomats in the West have concluded that there's basically no future for Ethiopia, that there will be no cure. Therefore, one, they don't want to be blamed. They just want to keep a bandage on it. So they don't want to legitimize the election by sending observers because they know these observers are professional and they will come back and report what they see, and that will piss off the Ethiopian government. Therefore, by not sending observers, but also financing, two contradictions that you pointed out, they are achieving their short-term policy objectives. On one hand, keep the legitimacy of their observing missions, because they can't do what African Union and IGAD and others do. They can't lie about it, because the people, European Union and others, are professionals. They are going to document what they see. So they don't want to put themselves in an awkward position. And if they send them, they are going to report the truth. The truth is going to disappoint a piece of Abiy, and they are going to lose the kind of access. One thing that really disappointed me about the diplomatic community is they are really not there to help bridge their country and Ethiopia for development partnership, for growing together. They are just there to pass time and also to get some access. How much they value access to some junior diplomats, junior officials in the government is just incredible. And the Ethiopian government, this is an old state, so they figured out how the West functions. So by controlling access, they have turned the diplomats into their puppets, right? So what do the diplomats advise their home office in Brussels, in Washington? Hey, whatever you do, don't do what pisses off the government, because the government will deny us access. Another issue is this vague idea of competition with China over Ethiopia. There's actually no competition over Ethiopia with China. China has left Ethiopia practically. Probably the only country in Africa where Chinese investment has been leaving is Ethiopia. There was a Chinese man who was speaking Amharic last week because they made, the level of abuse in the fuel distribution system made him so angry. He was speaking. And I spoke to so many Chinese investors when I was in Ethiopia, that many of them have either reduced or completely quit and left. There's actually, except symbolic gestures, there's actually no competition. But these Western diplomats have created an impression at their home office that China is encroaching on Ethiopia, and you have to compete. The way to compete is to grease the wheels of power in Addis. So they have become so cynical about prospect of a better future, a democratic future, a peaceful future. They are just passing time. Not only in the election. Look at what they're doing with the Pretoria Agreement. This is the first time I saw where major powers signed on peace agreement as a guarantors, but just watched while that agreement unraveled without doing anything. Lifting sanction. They are lifting sanction on forces that fought in that war. They are causing up to all entities. The West was not able to protect one successful intervention they made in Ethiopia, which was the Pretoria Agreement. That's the one successful intervention they did, as far as I know, during my political lifetime. They were not able to use their leverage to force implementation of that agreement. Why? Because they are really not serious and they are not committed. Entities that could not, remain committed to implementation of an agreement they brokered, I don't expect them to commit to fair and free election. So I'm not surprised.
No, it's not only the West. I mean, the African Union spectacularly failed the Pretoria Agreement. They
African
have not
Union,
even worked
the reason,
on.
the reason, look, it's expectation, you see. African Union has lost legitimacy. It has lost the respect. It has lost that Pan-Africanism, that care. It has become just, as Marara Gudina called them, just a club of dictators. Nobody expects us, an African
Protecting
Union
one
to care.
another.
They're just protecting one another. And look, guess who's leading the African Union's election observers? Obasanjo. The same Obasanjo who...
That's Kenyatta. But Obasanjo was reappointed.
Kenyatta and Obasanjo. Both of them.
Um,
Obasanjo is coming. Obasanjo is coming, and Kenyatta. Two gentlemen. High respect. I love them. Both of them. Wonderful individuals. But they did not have the institutional support from member states and from African Union to see through implementation of Pretoria. These two gentlemen are leading these delegations to observe the election. I mean, what a sick joke is that? So an African Union, I don't have a high expectation. That's why I'm not critical of them. I'm critical of the Western world because I have had higher expectation, particularly given how much they committed themselves in ending at least in pausing the war in Tigray, in pushing through. I was there and I saw how much they committed to, to the Pretoria, to making that the parties agree to the Pretoria agreement. But after that, they faded away. And because I had such a high expectation, and their performance is so low, that's why I talk about them. But African Union and IGAD, these are two entities that are irrelevant in African politics.
Jawar, I'm gonna let you go, but when I had Professor Merara last time, I asked him, what is going to happen to Ethiopia then? Because we were discussing about the election, the national dialogue, and disarmament issues and everything. And he laid out 4 scenarios, what he believes is going to be the future of Ethiopia if a genuinely committed political settlement is not reached, which is unlikely to happen under the auspices of the ruling Prosperity Party. What would be yours? I don't know if you have seen that interview or are familiar with his 4 scenarios, but I want to ask you what you think is going to happen in the post-election.
This election is inconsequential. I mean, in our mind, and things I discussed earlier, and kind of killing hope, yeah. But in the larger scheme of things, the election is really inconsequential. What's really consequential is the war. Second, it is the economy. The war has been paused for various reasons, including the war in Iran and other things. The rainy season is coming. There is massive mobilization in Tigray. There is massive mobilization in Amhara. There is massive mobilization in Sudan, and massive preparation on the side of the Eritrea, and already complete mobilization on the Ethiopian government side. All the cadets and those who operate the drones and others who have been studying in different countries have been recalled. They have been staying 24 hours on standby. The army is on standby. And other stuff. UAE has moved much of its resources from Bosaso into Ethiopia. The drones most of them are in Bahardar, and the intelligence operations are in Addis. The forces are on standby. And I mean, we are used to these killings and war. We are not paying attention. A general was killed a few days ago. Right? And so this signals a lot of stuff. So the future really depends, one, how this war will play out. Second, the economy is dying. The cost of living is spiraling out of control. The rural area continue to be ravaged with conflict, corruption. I don't know. Embezzlement, not even corruption. Grand level of embezzlement. Institutional, official embezzlement has become so widespread. It is sinking the economy. And if you open TikTok, all you see is people complaining, people crying about how life has become unbearable. And this will fuel the conflict. This will makes the future uncertain. So these two things, the real potential of the war and the ever worsening economic condition, will determine where the country will go. If we survive these two, if we survive the war, and if we survive as a country, the economic condition, post PP government, if we are able to outlive, if this not us, not only individuals, but if Ethiopia as a state is able to outlive this crisis, which is strangely it could, because this state is refusing to die. It's such a resilient state. Is it 2 years ago I mentioned about these old states? I took it, I think, from Kaplan. These old states, this ancient state, have strange ability to be resilient. States like Egypt, Iran, and all these states, Syria, they refuse to die because I think their roots are like a tree. They're so deep. If it survives this, I want to end it with a positive note. I see that there could be a light at the end of the tunnel. If you observe our media and social media, one, despite all this media restriction and crackdown, there is an expansion of the media space. The mushrooming of podcasters, it is democratizing. It is wrestling the control from the state. It's wrestling control from powerful media entities. It's privatizing and it is pluralizing our media space. Second, while group dynamics, ethnicity, and others continue, individualism is emerging as well. You see individuals breaking away from the pack, standing, solid on principles and fighting for what they believe in. The fragmentation in Tigray, for example, it has two sides. On one side, it aggravates the conflict. On the other side, it also reduces the power of ethno-nationalism. In Oromia, the ruling party, when they fall out with Amhara, their fallback was Oromia. They thought, because of historical animosity between these political communities, the Oromos will just rally behind them, right? That's not what we are observing. People are telling them, no. The same bullets that are killing people in Gondar are killing people in Shawa. So, and the emergence of economy as a main rallying, probably since 1974, when the land issue was at the forefront, the issue of economy, issue of employment, issue of income, issue of cost of living has emerged. The economy has emerged as an important political issue. So this all gives me that if we survive, maybe not during those of us with gray hair, at least during the next generation, there is a pluralization and liberalization of the political space. The political mind is, these wars, these terrible wars we underwent in Tigray, in Amhara, in Oromia, showed us the limit of nationalism. It showed us the brutality. These things have been reporting, for example, in Oromia. The enemy is not just the other. The enemy is within. The idea of the enemy within is sinking. What's happening in Amhara, what's happening in Tigray, is giving people to have a second look. Oh, the enemy is not just the outsider. There is also enemy within. And therefore, what we need to do is to, act as individuals, act also on certain principles instead of as a pack of a crowd. So I see a future where, some level of, citizens are now emerging instead of groups. This thing, Hobsbawm and also Lencho later talks about constitutional patriotism level of stuff could emerge, which I, in the last, when I wrote for the Standard, I told it, progressive patriotism, something like that could emerge down the road, because people are now, I don't know, I don't want to make it. Are you watching what the soldiers are doing? I mean, the soldiers are coming with their uniform, protesting for their rights. The general comes down, try to crack down, and the response from the active duty soldiers is no, 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 no. We are tired of war, and we love our country. We are tired of war, and we need to be compensated for what we sacrificed. This is new. This individual-based, citizen-based, cross-ethnic, cross-religious advocacy and solidarity gives me hope.
That's a very interesting space. Yeah. When you said about the privatization of the media production on be that on TikTok, which I'm not terribly familiar with, maybe I should come join you there. Makes me wonder the kind of obsession the regime has on the media, particularly at the Standard, over the past 1 year, having a chokehold on whatever we're doing. We're closely being monitored, whatever is happening there. And at the same time, they're losing grip left and right. And they're, excessively focused on disabling the capacity to grow of media like Addis Standard. Makes me smile sometimes, but also sad at the same time. So anyhow, that's a very interesting space that you're navigating and scenario. Jawar, thank you very, very much for joining me. I hope to be able to get you back after the election, and we will see how the election is going to happen. Obviously, not a lot of enthusiasm, but it's an off day, so at least we can enjoy the off day and look at. And just to say that the difference here, Jawar, is between the last election from a media personality. For me, the difference is that, in the last election, we had, 5 or 6 journalists deployed in different parts of the country, just reporting live from those areas. We're not able to do that this year because the election board thought it was better to not give us access because the Ethiopian Media Authority somehow decided that our license is revoked. So there is that relationship between institutions that are piling up on independent media to tell you, because the Ethiopian Media Authority has decided to revoke your license, we're not going to give you, you are not registered by. So that systematic disabling and removal of an independent media like Addis Standard from reporting on the election is one area that I observed over the past few weeks. And that's also a difference between the 2021 election and this election. I just wanted to make that point. So, Jawar, I'm gonna get you back, particularly on this the Horn of Africa crisis, the conflict in Sudan. We're not paying attention to that. I want us to come back with that specific topic on another podcast.
I'm here whenever you need me. And on the media issue, I wouldn't worry much because they are bringing old weapons to new battle. It's like relying on tanks on the era of drones. Shutting down Addis Standard just makes the government lose because officials medias report this registered medias, the traditional medias. They can be monitored. They can be, managed. The social media, you can't manage it. Now, when you shut down the official, traditional, mainstream media, where do the audience turn to? They will turn into the social media, which is unregulated, uncontrolled, and and it has a lot of it will make the government lose. So it is their loss if they continue to crack down on the traditional media.
Yeah. Thanks for the view, Jawar.